Welcome to a special edition of America Uncanceled. I'm joined with journalist Marco Antonio Costa. Thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
And we're addressing what is happening, this authoritarian regime under President Lula and this very authoritarian, corrupt Supreme Court that is really censoring and persecuting not only members of Congress, but activists and journalists. What is going on? What is the current state in Brazil right now?
I can give you some fresh news about what just happened in Brazil. They inaugurated a center to combat disinformation and protect democracy. You know by whom?
By whom?
By the Justice Alexandre de Moraes, which is the main reason why we are here in Brazil. The Superior Electoral Court inaugurated a center to combat disinformation.
Right.
And obviously, they are targeting all the conservatives in Brazil doing that. And
who's in charge of the center? Have they announced who's in charge of the center? Or?
The justice.
Oh, the justice is
Yes.
in charge. So let's remember here in the U.S., we saw this with President Biden, where under the Department of Homeland Security, they were pushing this sort of idea of a disinformation center as well, very similar to what you all are doing. The Republicans were able to basically kill that idea, but that's not obviously the case in Brazil.
It's impossible in Brazil because the Superior Electoral Court has powers in Brazil that you guys here can't imagine. They have like the sum of the executive, legislative, and also judiciary branches below the Superior Electoral Court. So it's unprecedented. We are living in a human rights crisis due to that, to Alexandre de Moraes as a member of the Supreme Court and also presiding the Superior Electoral Court in Brazil.
And this justice was appointed by President Lula?
Actually, he was appointed by Temer, who was vice president of Dilma, that was impeached.
Oh, okay. So walk us through, you worked for a network and then the government came in and basically shut you all out. You were all fired. Tell us about that. When did that happen? And how bad is it getting to be a journalist and the freedom of the press in Brazil?
It's intimidating because they are using like all the resources of the bureaucratic apparatus in the state to go after conservatives, mainstream media outlets, and also people who likes to, sometimes tell the truth, sometimes criticize the judiciary branch, sometimes criticizing the Supreme Court. And the main thing that I always say in my programs is that it's a systemic crisis that we're facing because the Supreme Court acts on a really persecutory way, and all the judges from instances below are starting to act the same. They see the Supreme Court as a precedent. They are opening new precedents to persecute and to judicialize crimes of opinion.
And the crimes of opinion, people ending up in jail for an extensive period of time. Tell us the story of, I think there was a photographer that was at that January 8th event in the protest. What happened there?
So many people, like the photographer, a homeless guy, a guy selling popcorn. And the problem is it's a Soviet judgment. Like we have no due process at all. They have no ways to appeal, no means to appeal.
Has that ever happened before, or is it a new
Never.
thing? So that's a new thing.
That's why it's a crisis, because they took it to themselves on the Supreme Court and says, okay, now we're defending people. Actually, we're defending democracy from its abolition. Those people, the homeless guy, the photographer, no weapons found whatsoever in anybody. But they say that they were trying to, but they are charged with violent abolition of the democracy in Brazil, which is absurd.
And then what are the sentences? Are they long sentences?
They're sentencing people more in the Supreme Court than homicides, than drug dealers. Yes, we're talking about 14 to 17 years.
And then you're saying that there's no way to appeal this, like they are stuck. There's no way to.
There's no means to appeal.
What can what can the U.S. do? The international community do? What's the ask that you all are saying that people need to get involved and put the pressure on Lula's authoritarian regime?
I think CPAC is doing a great job telling that to the world. We have no judicial instances above the Supreme Court, so we need to pressure them with media outlets outside Brazil, because Brazil has a monopoly of one network called Globo, and they are funded by the government.
The state, yes.
Deep state special interests. So it's really hard because they do a really nasty job of always defending the Supreme Court, always defending Lula and everything they do. So we need to go outside Brazil to point out and denounce what's happening with those persecuted people and our democracy.
So you have the media monopoly, then you have the elites and the bureaucrats that are controlling the government as well. What do the Brazilian people think?
That's challenging. Most people that understand the situation, they say, okay, Marco, you're right. But many people still think that it's not that big of a deal because they are alienated. They are like brainwashed by Globo. And our job is to shake them up and say, okay, you don't have to agree with everything I say. I'm a conservative, you may be not, but what's happening, it's just unfair, illegal, and those crimes committed by the justices should be punished. That's the discussion we should have.
The other thing is, tell us, what made you decide, okay, I'm going to want to be, I'm a conservative, I'm going to fight. Because there's people, and I'll tell you, in my own family, my father was a political prisoner, was either he could have stayed quiet, let the government take over, which they were taking over his businesses and everything else, or you stand up and fight. What's driving you? Why do you think it's so important to fight right now?
Because it has to be done. I think we have a role to play here to denounce all acts of tyrants should be denounced. No matter if they come from the judiciary branch, the legislative branch, or the executive branch. And what's most unprecedented in Brazil is that we are facing something that you guys can't imagine. You have progressives in your Supreme Court, but they still voted to make Trump eligible.
Yeah, keep him on the ballot.
Keep him on the ballot, okay? So that's fair.
Yeah, for now.
For now.
Yes.
But in our Supreme Court, they have much more power than yours.
Yes.
I told them here a few days ago, like they judge, they sentence 103,000 cases each year, whereas your Supreme Court judges decides on rules on 80 cases a year. So it's unimaginable power, and people see that as some wrongdoing and something that should be denounced, but they are afraid. But that's the problem. Silence is never an option. Yeah. If you don't say what's happening in Brazil and you are a journalist, then either you are an accomplice or a coward. Both of them are helping the tyrants to go away and to remain, to maintain Brazil in this. This is not a democracy anymore. We are living under fire by the Supreme Court.
And why should the people in America care?
Because we are in the same group. We are people like you. I think, just like me, what do you gain from denouncing that? If you could go and say, do a program about anything else, you see, because it's the right thing to do. Like, if you are conservatives and you want to defend the US and the world, you are the largest conservative group in the world, I think that's a moral obligation to do what's right. Besides, we can talk about illegal immigration coming from Brazil, we can talk about political rights in Brazil, but it's just the right thing to do as a moral obligation.
When you want these countries to prosper, because when these countries prosper, the U.S. also prospers. Both can mutually grow together. So we want to thank you, Marco Antonio Costa, for joining us. I think it's It's such an important conversation. I know here at CPAC, we stand with the work that you all are doing. We stand for freedom, and we will continue to follow this incredible and really, I think, just tough situation that your people are experiencing. So thank you so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for watching, and we'll have a lot more coverage on this. Look, I think it's important that we keep having these discussions. As you know, CPAC has gone international, and we are working with our allies to make sure that political opponents, that journalists, that they have the freedom to speak that freely, and that they're not being censored. And we're going to keep fighting against these authoritarian regimes and keep shedding light on these horrific situations that we're learning. So thank you all for watching.